what the heck I just read or what I fully think about it, but we're gonna try to figure this out together. What is up, book babes? I am conflicted, but here, ready to talk about this book that I had such high expectations and now I'm confusion. I'm all about trying new genres and I'm especially excited about trying some really highly recommended ones like the book I'm gonna talk about in this video today. But sometimes it makes me question, who are we? And why do we accept these things in literature? And also, should we accept certain things in literature just because they were acceptable for a time? If that makes sense. I don't know. We're gonna try it, we're gonna discuss, we're gonna figure this out together, you and me. Deal? Shake on it? I don't know. I just feel like my mind is everywhere and I'm trying, okay? So I haven't had a drink on here in a long time because it's just been too hot to freaking live or even walk on the ground without melting my face and my feet off. But I did realize that there is a very popular drink here in Italy. Just like Switzerland, I didn't expect this certain iced tea to be all the rage here. And it is called estate. It's a play on the word summer, you know, the Italian word for summer, and the most popular flavor is actually peach. I've had it, I think it's really good, but I've never had it in these like tiny little cute things, and it even comes with a straw. So we're just gonna, you know, shank, it's been a while, and dive into this book because it's freaking nuts, you guys. I know I have to do more reviews on these books and actually share because, you know, my thoughts are not just going to go out into the wild and people are gonna know what I thought about a book that I was reading at the time. It says fora qui, so I'm guessing that means stab here. Cheers. All right. I feel like this would be a 10 out of 10 if the straw wasn't paper. Don't come at me, I'm not trying to kill the turtles. I miss the straws that I had back at home and I haven't bought any new ones here. First world problems, doesn't matter. Past month, I actually picked up I Am Legend. Now this book actually became the wildly famous and popular I Am Legend movie starring Will Smith. And we all know that scene with the dog and just everyone freaking sobbing during that time. And it's basically this dystopia where the world just goes freaking nuts and you have all these weird looking monsters running everywhere, which honestly I feel like that is a better alternative to what we've been seeing so far in the world, but less on my existential crisis and more on escapism through books. Yes. The book, however, is drastically different. I've heard so many people that have loved the book hate the movie so hard. I was so surprised. I thought this was an accurate depiction of the book, but of course I should know better because book over movie is usually what happens. But the more I read reviews, the more interested I was. I did not give myself any spoilers, but all reviews kept saying that the actual theme of the book is so beyond what the movie could even dream of doing, that the twists and turns at the end is freaking mind-blowing and amazing, and they were so distraught by how absolutely wrecked Hollywood did, you know, this movie. It was just a mess. And I was like, there's no way it's that bad, is it? And let me just tell you, a few pages into this book and I was like, Hollywood done messed up. This is freaking scarier than the movie, creepier, more depressing than the movie, and I didn't even think that was possible, and I'll tell you why. So I Am Legend, the book, focuses on Robert, and Robert is like this ordinary guy, you know. Technically the book is set in like the 70s, but it was written in the 50s, and so for the readers at that time, the 70s is the future. For us, it's like, damn, 1970s, hella old. Robert is your typical, I don't know, weird uncle that lives on a farm that believes the apocalypse is coming, drinks all these whiskeys, and it's just freaking weird. And so Robert isn't anything extraordinary. He's not even a good human at heart. Like, he has no real compassion on like, oh, I wish I could save humanity or I could go find people. He's just living in this really awful existence of just trying to get through every day. I loved him sometimes, and other times, dude, this guy's problematic. Like, there's something wrong there, but we'll get to that. What I really liked about the author was that he made the MC question things that I would question, and maybe that means like there's something wrong with me, I'm not okay. Because at one point Robert is literally like, why am I doing this? Why am I living this miserable life trying to survive every day where there's literally like no point? Society isn't gonna come back, my whole family's dead, every single night there are these freaking vampires screaming at at me to come out. Every single day I have to refix the house. Why then? Like, what is the point of my existence right now? Robert was such a mood. Yeah, I've said the same thing. I even said this argument during like this high school debate a long time ago. And I was like, why are we trying so hard to repopulate the earth? And this is the same argument I had when watching Interstellar. I was like, why can't they all just die peacefully together instead of trying to find this planet where they're gonna repopulate with these things? People look at me so weird. I don't know, every time I say that. Just like if it's a horrible existence, why are you working? I don't know. You tell me if there's something wrong with this, if I'm the only one thinking this. So the reason the story is actually creepier than the movie is because in the movie, the creatures are like these weird human looking things, but they're not human. They don't talk. They don't have a consciousness. They just are after Will Smith. They're bred to kill. Like that's where they came from. They almost look like aliens and predators that just came out of nowhere. In the book, however, these creatures are vampires. And I need to preface this by letting you know that I Am Legend is like the blueprint and the revolutionary book for future fantasy and paranormal stories. This type of vampire book did not exist until this book. At least that's what I've seen in my, brief research, that he kind of paved the way for all of these other books we love now. And as a fantasy and sci-fi lover, that was pretty exciting to read. Imagine you've never read anything about vampires or creatures ever before, and then suddenly this book comes out from the publishing hot press, and it's like, whoa, I did not see this type of creature coming. Needless to say, it was revolutionary. It reinvented the wheel, and here we are. So when I say vampires, you might be like, yeah, whatever, that's not scary, but for its time it was. I think it's creepier because in the book, these vampires are human-like. They do talk to you, and to me, it's always creepier thinking of a creature that has very, very obvious consciousness and is talking to me and is clearly targeting me and is clever and smart and can figure things out. These vampires try to lure Robert out every single night, either by screaming at him, hauling at him, banging on his door, going on his rooftop, and all this stuff. Where it gets weird is that he even talks about sexy women vampires trying to lure him by freaking like twerking in front of his door. Okay, not actually twerking, but like they are doing lewd gestures to entice him out because they're like, oh, he's a man, he's been lonely for so long, let me just lure him in here with my woman charms and then just like suck the life out of him. Where it gets weird is where Robert himself is very creepy with this topic, with women vampires and like his urges. And so throughout the whole book, he always has this burning loin that's like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm gonna die because like I'm thinking about them, and he had to like cover the peephole because it was enticing to him to think about these women even though he knew he was gonna die. But it gets weird because later on, as he's trying to figure out where this came from, like why are they vampires and stuff, and he does these experiments, he's very clearly biased toward women, and he experiments on the women vampires a lot more than men, and he even calls himself out for it. Why am I only experimenting on women when the men are also right there and very easy for me? And he even thinks about assaulting their form. So in this book, when it is daylight, whether they're inside a dark space or not, vampires are dormant, so they just go to sleep. So Robert is very safe in the daylight specifically. So when he's out, he tries to kill as many as possible while they're in their resting form. And this is why it's easy for him to trap them and start experimenting on them later on. But it's just so weird that he's this weird, isolated man and like still so fixated on this. And we're talking about fiction here, so the author can write whatever the hell he wants. He didn't have to write those elements of thinking of potentially, essaying someone or are someone. And that was just very uncomfortable throughout the book. Why? Like, why is this even a thought or a creation that the author added in there? So that was just like super, super weird. It makes me wonder, like, is this who Robert was the whole time? Is the author trying to say that, oh my gosh, this poor man is going without, doing it for so long, such a torture, because I just have no empathy for that. So I would say this is where I just don't know how to feel because there are so many other elements I really liked about this book. I talked about him and the monotonous way of living. Why is he doing this? We get to find out what happened in this world a little bit over time, and we actually even get to find out pretty much the truth behind these vampires and what caused this to happen, which I thought was really interesting. And it actually plays more into sci-fi than fantasy because there is a scientific element and technology that goes into this. Robert isn't some insane scientist or, like I said, anything super special, but he's still trying his best to figure out what's going on. He's a very lonely person, like I said, but it's so weird too because if he does run into some living thing, it's almost like he feels an automatic entitlement to it and talks about how he's been daydreaming of it and like his perfect partner and all this stuff. And I'm just like, even if you were to find the other lone survivor, like what makes you think you're entitled to them? I think that's just very uncomfortable and weird. This book also has elements of some racism or touches on race. I've read some more in-depth essays on this specific topic or like subtopic within the book because it was written during the time where civil rights movements were starting. I was really confused why at one point he started calling the vampires those black bastards. I turned around and I was like, why is he calling them that? Like, is the author actually like racist? And he's saying like, you know, the civil rights movements are like leeches of society and he's mad about it or something. In the same breath, the main character Robert ends up making a joke of, well, they're not that bad. Oh, but would you let your daughter marry one of them? Like marry one of the vampires. And that is a very racist like term used during that time or even now where it's like, oh, I'm okay with so-and-so. Oh, but would you let your daughter marry one? You know, like I hope that makes sense. I know I'm kind of like rambling here, but that was a really weird comment to read, okay? And when I read it, I was like, well, it sounds like he's making fun of that because he was calling himself out later on, and I don't remember the specific lines, but he was just kind of like, this is the dumbest thing ever and we should accept this new society moving forwards. Basically how the society is completely changing. At the same time, I'm like, if this movement is supposed to be represented by vampires completely murdering everyone, I don't think that's a good way to put it and say you're not racist because they are like murderers and savages and all these things. So that was also really confusing until the end. I don't want to spoil it for you. I will say the end makes it so you understand the title, and I think for its time I could see how this was mind-blowing. And then I understood what he meant by all of those comments by the end of the book. At least I think I do. And it's basically talking about this new society that is rising and it's not a bad thing. I don't know, there are a lot of more essays that go more in depth about this, and I feel like I could take some time to actually read it more because it was just weird. I bet there is a lot in there and I really don't know much more about the author himself. He didn't make Robert into this amazing hero savior type of person in this book. However, all the comments with Robert's issue with like women and being alone. I don't know if he was trying to draw empathy from me or not, but it was not working. I was just grossed out. It felt like super weird. I did not like those parts of the book. And they became a little bit more dominant when it was clear that Robert was freaking nuts and freaking going crazy and like alone. Even in the book, which is actually a detail I did like. I know I'm like everywhere in this video, I'm sorry. But there's a detail in the book that I did like. There's not really like any quotes, even though it says blah, 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 he said. But there's like no quotes around what he supposedly said. And then the first time he talks, the narration says like, I haven't heard my voice in like 8 months, 6 months, a year, whatever. And I realized like, my gosh, that makes sense. Like, why would he ever need to talk when he's just like on his own? Which adds a new level of like how freaking isolated Robert was. Overall, I would have to say like, I am happy I read this book because it did start off this genre that I freaking love. Can I stand behind this author? I have no idea. I would have to reread this. The author clearly puts their ideas in their books, right? Their philosophies, their politics, whatever they might think. They are trying to tell a greater story, which is the point of like fantasies and dystopian novels. They are essentially commenting on something important. And so I don't really know whether or not this author is trying to say, move on, we have a new world. A man like Robert has no place in this world anymore. He's of old, or if he's saying poor Robert, he doesn't have a place in this new world. I don't know. I just wanted to share some thoughts with all of you, and if you've read this, let me know down below. I feel like I was actively looking at reviews like, who is rating this high, who's rating this low. Not surprisingly, it was mainly like men that were mainly like praising this book like crazy, and a few handful of women and some lower ratings that were women. And I was like, okay, you know, at least that's what I'm assuming off of like pictures and stuff. It's interesting. I want to hear more opinions from women, also people of color, on this book and what it actually means. It definitely got a lot of reactions out of me. Very creepy. What does it mean as a reviewer for when I come to my audience and talk to y'all about these types of stories? I want to be a responsible reader, but I also just want to enjoy what I'm reading. And so, can I separate the two? Can I just read freely, or do I not have the luxury of reading just for reading and recommending just because I like it without thoroughly and profoundly thinking about the literature I'm consuming and recommending? I'm not always the best at capturing every single theme or commentary, whether it's subtle or not, but I do feel like sometimes a huge responsibility just because I'm a woman and also a woman of color. And I know it's crazy because it's not fair, and oftentimes so many people from like my community were like, hey, I don't represent every single Latin person, I don't represent every single woman in the world. I can't deny this sense of responsibility of having to be a more vigilant reader or reviewer because of my background, because of the mix and diversity I have of coming from two nationalities and also being a woman and also having the privilege of having access to all these books. This is me being honest with you as a reviewer that I really do my best to read and recommend and like fix on all these things, and I don't want to accidentally recommend something that is so clearly bad or harmful for a certain group. And I often become very self-reflective to the point of camera died. But yes, I often become so self-reflective these themes and what I'm reading to the point of spiraling, complete overthinking, and then I'm not even sure. I feel so paralyzed. Is this good? Is this not? I read something that threw off my radar and now my radar's ringing, but how much research should I put into this and what is being said out there? And I do my best to research certain books that made me feel weird, or like look at reviews and articles or breakdowns, see like, okay, what are other point of views out there? So this is just one of those books where I am a little confused. And I actually have a favorite quote from this book that I feel like summarizes my favorite part of this horror-esque book. And it says, "In a world of monotonous horror, there could be no salvation in wild dreaming." That just resonated so much because I also feel like our world is so overwhelming sometimes where it's almost scary to dream. And in this sense, Robert is just living in this world where everything's crumbled. There's really nothing else to strive for other than survival. And so he doesn't give himself the luxury of dreaming. On the other hand, there are all these underlying things that happen in this book. I'm not entirely sure what the author is fully saying. So those are just some serious thoughts I wanted to share with you all. You can read this book and let me know what you think as well. Anytime, DMs, or come back to this video and comment below. If I didn't scare you off, I hope you will subscribe and journey on this with me as I try other genres and try to share my thoughts more openly with you all. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, make sure you hit the like button and comment, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!